Welcome to the presentation of Cognigy.AI's new advanced translation capabilities, enabled by Inbuilt Real-Time Machine Translation. Here at Cognigy, we're always working with our customers and partners on identifying opportunities to further enhance customer and employee service automation through the application of cutting-edge technology. In this case, AI-powered real-time translation capabilities. The majority of our customers are operating globally, meaning that their customers and employees speak multiple languages. That's why multi-language capabilities of virtual agents are so important, and why they picked an enterprise-grade platform like Cognigy.AI in the first place. But even within single markets or countries, multi-language can be critical for accessibility and a low threshold for engagement, not just in markets like Switzerland or India. Cognigy.AI is built from the ground up to work in multi-language scenarios. We have a natural language understanding system that supports over 100 languages, plus a generic model to support all the others that we don't have gold models for. We support full localization of flows and intent models with fallbacks, partial translation, local variations, truly enterprise-ready language operations. For example, we work with a large airline, and they are one of the most international companies in the world, and helped us understand the requirements for going global with conversational AI. Now, the truth is, there's really nothing that can't be done today with Cognigy.AI when it comes to multilingual virtual agents. And in the past 12 months, we have not heard any requirement around multilanguage that we could not serve with the standard offering. But there's a catch. What we found is that customers don't max out the possibilities they have with Cognigy.AI when it comes to multilingual virtual agents. They don't offer their bots in 10 languages, even though they could. What keeps them back is not the technology, but the manual effort to create translations. And that's why we decided to invest into mechanisms to remove that bottleneck. And as an AI company, it's just natural to take a machine learning powered approach. To solve our customers' challenges, we've decided to fully integrate machine translation capabilities into the Cognigy.AI platform. The translations are provided by one of 3 of the leading providers globally, Microsoft, Google, or DeepL, with more providers being added to the platform in the next coming months. The translation can be used not just in localizing your virtual agent, but also in translating conversations with virtual agents in real time into more than 90 different languages. And not just on chat, but also integrated, of course, with the Cognigy Voice Gateway, so you can also translate conversations on the phone lines. Now, with all of that, we enable 3 exciting new use cases. Firstly, there is a localization of existing content. Using machine translation, we can now let Cognigy.AI pre-translate content for our editors and then go through it and fix it where needed. This works for content, but it also works for the machine learning models, where we support the full translation of example sentences and default replies at the click of a button. Secondly, we can deploy virtual agents in new languages within seconds by translating the conversations between users and virtual agents in real time, even with auto detection. So if a user speaks to our bot in Japanese, Cognigy.AI will translate the Japanese back into the bot's language, run the natural language understanding, produce outputs from the flows, and back translate those outputs to Japanese. Through that, we can essentially deploy our virtual agent to more than 100 languages literally within seconds. And as I said, yes, this also works for phone calls. Thirdly, and most excitingly, this doesn't just work for bots. It also works for human agents. We can speak to an agent in our native language, even if the agent only speaks English. Just like with the bot or virtual agent, the inputs from the user will be translated to, for example, English for the agent to understand, and the agent's English answers are translated back into the user's language, whilst keeping a record of both for compliance purposes. And with that, I would say, let's take a look. So here we are in Cognigy.AI and have a virtual agent for restaurants, which lets us book tables, place orders, and more. We have 3 flows, And in the main flow here, we can see some nice graphical content, etc. And if we try out the bot, we can see that we get a nice welcome message. Then here we get some options, make a reservation, etc. And we can go through the bot like that, pick a location, pick a date, etc., etc. Now this bot is currently only available in English. And what if we want to localize it? Now what we can do, we can go to the localization options and create a new locale. So let's say we want to localize it into German. We give the locale a name. This can be really anything. And then we pick an NLU language and a fallback locale. Now if we go back to the flow editor after creating the locale, we will see that we will now get the option to switch the locale, and we will see which nodes have already been localized. The localized ones have a color, and the non-localized ones are black and white. So we can see the say node has not been localized yet, and we can add a localization. Now if we haven't configured translation, we can only add an empty localization or copy from the US, from the NUS one in this case, and then we get a copy of the English one, and we need to manually translate this and then put it back into the say node and save it. Now I'm going to remove the localization, and we're now going to add the magic of machine translation to this flow. So in order to do that, we go to the agent settings, and at the bottom we will find the translation settings where we can configure a translation provider, and we can choose from Microsoft, Google, or DeepL. And here we're going to choose Microsoft, which I pre-configured. We can bring our own API key, and we can put in some settings for request retries, etc. And very importantly, also caching. How long do we want the translation to be cached for, so that the same phrases don't have to be shot at the translator over and over again, causing extra cost. Now, as soon as we have configured a translation provider, we're getting extra options in the flow editor. So let's go back here and let's localize this one again. Now we're getting a menu, Add Translated Localization, which gives us the option to choose the locale to translate from and the language to translate from, so in this case English, and to translate to. We press confirm, and we get a localized node that has been fully translated automatically, and we can now go in and just fix that up. This works for all types of say and question nodes. So you can see here we have a node with quick replies, for example, and this one is now also fully translated, and that happened just within essentially a second. Now this doesn't just work for nodes, but it also works for intents. We can localize intents in the same way that we can localize nodes by going to an intent. So here we have an intent with a number of example sentences and a default reply which contains 2 cards. And here we can now go add a localization, and we get the same menu that we got before. We confirm, it translates all the example sentences and the default reply for us. Now, of course, we can do this one by one, or we can actually have bulk localization as well by clicking here and choosing to translate from another locale, and then we get the same menu that we got before, and this will then actually localize all intents for us. Now let's talk about real-time translation. This is the type of translation where we don't have to pre-translate everything, pre-localize everything, even if it's assisted with machine translation, but where the translation engine translates the conversation as it is happening. Now in Cognigy, we deploy virtual agents through so-called endpoints. Here we have a web chat endpoint, it links to the main flow, and if we go and talk to that web chat, we are going to then have a chat with this restaurant virtual agent that we've seen earlier. Welcome to Cognigy Eatery. How may I help you? Okay, make a reservation, and then it's asking us where, etc., etc. Right? So I can even write something like tomorrow night at 6 p.m., for example, and that is still going to work. Now, what if we want to make this chat available in another language? For that, all we have to do is go back to the endpoint editor and activate real-time translation, which we find under the real-time translation settings. In here, we can enable the translation and select a user language. So we could select, for example, I don't know, Chinese. We save, we open the web chat again, and now we're assuming that the language that is being typed in is Chinese. We can actually use any language we want to trigger the bot here. And the bot content is being translated in real time, as is the NLU. Now we can say make a reservation in Chinese, as we can see. And we can now have this whole conversation, including full localization of everything, yeah? Including here the month and the dates, the days of the week, etc. Everything in Chinese, and it fully works. We cannot just have a pre-selected language, but we can also say auto-detect. And when we say auto-detect, we have an extra setting, set user input language on execution count. So we can say whatever language the user is using on their first input is the language that the bot will use from then on. Let's take a look at that. Now we've just configured the endpoint to detect the language from the first user input. So if I come in and I type something in Danish, the system will detect that I did say something in Danish and will now output everything in Danish as well. And I can now, of course, use the buttons, or I can also type something in Danish. Like, for example, I want to make a reservation, and the system will now fully work in Danish and let me make a reservation in that way. This now works with any language that the translator supports. So if I come in and, for example, start off in Japanese, saying Cognigy.AI, I'm going to get a Japanese output. And now I can also, for example, here make a reservation in Japanese. Right? As you can see, I can pick Düsseldorf and I can pick the date, and again, everything is localized into Japanese. So that is a way where we can, on the one hand, auto-detect the language from the user inputs. But what we could also do is we could inject the language from the front end, right? So we could, for example, say, if the language that the browser is using is Japanese, then automatically set it to Japanese, or give the customer a choice. Say in Japanese, would you like to continue in Japanese? And then write in English, because you can tag parts of the sentence not to be translated. You could say, oh, would you like to continue in English, and give the user 2 buttons to then choose from, right? Now, the great thing is that all of this doesn't just work on chat. It actually works for all of our endpoint types. So we could, for example, create a voice gateway endpoint, point that also at the main flow, and we will see that in the settings for this, we now also have the real-time translation settings. So we configure a bot on the Cognigy voice gateway to use, for example, I don't know, Bulgarian or Czech speech-to-text, or ASR, then that will also be translated into English. The bot is run on English, and then it comes back and is back translated into that language and then output by the TTS engine. So yeah, it doesn't just work on chat, it works on actually all our endpoints, of which there are, of course, many to choose from, and that makes it an extremely powerful feature to super easily roll out your bots in more than 100 different languages, pretty much at the click of a button. But that isn't everything. Because with Cognigy.AI, you can not just real-time translate a conversation between a user and a virtual agent, but you can also real-time translate a conversation between a user and a human agent. Now let's take a look at that. If we go back to our web chat, I'm now pointing it at a different flow. This flow essentially just repeats what I just said, or when I say handover, hands the conversation over to a human agent. In the real-time translation setting, I've set up this endpoint to expect German inputs from the user, and the handover flow and the agent, in this case, will speak English. Now I'm going to open this up and open our Cognigy Live agent with the web chat side by side. So here on the left side, we have Cognigy Live agent. On the right side, we have the web chat that has been configured to expect German inputs. So if I, for example, say Guten Tag, which means good day, it's going to come back and say, Sie sagten Guten Tag. If I say SDF, it's going to come back and says, Sie sagten SDF. So now if I say, well, I want to speak to an agent, so I'll say handover. We can see the handover being triggered in Cognigy Live agent over here. And I can take this discussion, and here I can see the things the user has said, translated into the language of the agent. And here I can say what went back to the user, also translated into the language of the agent. So the agent can see what happened. Now you can see we have the German conversation here, we have the English conversation here. I can now say something like, how may I help you, for example. And the user will receive, wie kann ich Ihnen helfen? For example, which means how may I help you? So maybe I could say, ich möchte mein Ticket umbuchen. which means I would like to rebook my ticket. And we can see that this now here actually appears exactly like that. What is your booking number? So we can have a discussion, the agent can have a discussion in English, and the user sees everything in German or any of the other 100 plus languages that we do support through the translation, right? And we can now resolve this, and then here we are now back with the bot as we were before. Now let's just think about what we've seen here for a second. Of course, from a technological perspective, it's already amazing, right? We are translating in real time. It goes from the bot towards the agent. Everything is handled by Cognigy.AI. But think about it, what it means from a business perspective. From a business perspective, it means that you don't have to have agents that speak 100 different languages. You can concentrate on your core markets and have agents that speak 1 or maybe 2 different languages, maybe 3 different languages, but that's it. But you could still service customers in more than 100 different markets around the world, right? That is amazing customer service enabled by Cognigy.AI. And the best thing is, it doesn't just work with Cognigy Live Agent. It works with any other live agent system that you might have. May it be a Genesis, may it be a live person, may it be a Ring Central. You can plug Cognigy in the middle and it will act as your real-time translation provider also for these other third-party contact center systems. Now coming back here, let's take a look at what we just saw. First, we looked at localizing existing content. So using machine translation to support us in localizing existing virtual agents into different languages. And not just the content of the virtual agents, but also the intents. Right? We can pre-fill it with auto-translated content and fine-tune it later, leading to approximately 50% or more time savings for localizations from a primary into a secondary language. Then we looked at real-time translation. That is the live translation during a conversation of voice or text-based virtual agents. So the user speaks in one language, it is translated into the virtual agent's language, the NLU is run, the Cognigy flows are run, and the outputs are then back translated into the language of the user. We also have optional auto detection of the input language with smart settings so that we can say, okay, whatever the language is that the user spoke in first is going to be the language that we will be using afterwards. This allows for a one-click rollout into new markets and audiences without the need for manual content creation. Last but not least, we saw live agent augmentation, the real-time translation of human-to-human interactions. Now what that means is that you could even use Cognigy without using virtual agents at all. You could place Cognigy in between a web chat widget and a human chat application, which could be the Cognigy Live Agent application as we saw, but it could also be a Genesis, a live person, a Ring Central. It will work with all of these immediately out of the box as well. Right, and that essentially gives you human agents linguistic superpowers, because now all of a sudden your agents, despite only speaking English, can speak to customers in more than 100 different languages. Now many of you might be asking, how good is the quality? Right, and we actually benchmarked the quality of Microsoft, Google, and DeepL also against others and found them to be surprisingly or amazingly good. And the real question isn't how good is the quality? Is it sufficient? I think the real question should be, what is best for the customer? Now, if we have the budget and time to localize a bot, properly localize it into a secondary or third language, fine, we should do that. But what is better for, say, someone from Thailand who might not speak English? To have an English bot that doesn't help at all, or to have a Thai bot that may or may not once in a while get a phrase wrong? Right. The second one will, of course, be much more useful to that person, regardless of whether it's sometimes wrong or not, because they will still be able to get done whatever they want to get done. So the strategy we will propose is to localize your virtual agents into your primary or main market languages using maybe the assisted machine translation capabilities that we have. And then for all the other markets where your customers are, you can use the real-time translation or, of course, the agent augmentation as well. Now, what you would learn from that is in which regions are the bots being used the most, right? So if you have a real-time translation on for a specific market or for, let's say, 10 different specific markets, after a while, you will be able to tell which have been used the most, so you can then take that one and properly localize that one to get an even higher quality.